We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program senior contributor and columnist at The Intercept, host of their Deconstructed podcast, also a presenter and interviewer on Al Jazeera English. In fact, you just had Julian Castro on, and I guess you didn't necessarily plan to talk about impeachment, probably when you booked him. But Maddie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
So let's just, and you wrote a piece in The Intercept, which I think captures my frustration at this moment. But before we get there, because it appears that after the first hearing yesterday, which I think one could argue would be what should be a series of testimony, I should say, regarding impeachment, regarding the whole Ukrainian question. It sounds like Nancy Pelosi is still going to have Congress take a vacation for 2 weeks.
You know how important vacations are for politicians, Sam. It's very important, even in the middle of the biggest political crisis of 2019. Sorry, go on.
No, please go.
No, I was going to say, look, I'm torn on this. On the one hand, obviously, I'm not going to come here and defend people taking vacations in the middle of as fascists and racists take over the country. On the other hand, I am slightly worried about the reports coming out this week. This is why I wrote the Intercept column about the idea that they want to get this all done and dusted quickly so they can get back to, infrastructure week. They want to get this impeachment vote done. They want to narrow it down to Trump's dealings on Ukraine and Biden. They want to get it on the floor, vote it, and send it over to the Senate. And that's a problem for me because I think you only get one shot at impeachment, and that one shot needs to cover everything Trump's done that's impeachable, which is a lot of stuff, Sam.
Well, I am so baffled by this. I understand it insofar as Pelosi did not want to do this. I think it was, and Ryan Grimm over at The Intercept wrote a piece that showed sort of that the long journey to this impeachment. And largely it seems that a lot of those frontline Democrats, when they went home in August, heard from their constituents, like, you got to impeach this guy. And this, of course, was before the Ukraine stuff.
Remember what they were saying? Nobody wants impeachment. The public doesn't want impeachment. Well, number one, your base wants impeachment. And why is it only the Republican Party cares about what their base wants? Why does the Democratic Party never care what its base wants? And now you're looking at the polls that are out this week in the first 48 hours after the transcript has come out of the phone call, the whistleblower complaint. You're seeing the polling already shifting. Already. So, those of us who said public opinion will move as leadership is shown, I think we've already been vindicated in the space of 48 hours. I think over the space of the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be vindicated further.
And I would say this, that not only has the polling moved by 7 points, but there was Business Insider had a poll that shows that not only do people, we have 43% now saying that he should be impeached, but when you look at this polling, 38% think an inquiry is the right thing to do and will help Democrats electorally. 19% think an inquiry is the right thing to do, but will hurt Democrats electorally. So even though those numbers are only 43%,
that's a good point,
should be done, a lot of that hesitation is a sort of like a, the American voters, pundit saying like, I don't think this is going to be good politically.
Which is one of the biggest problems we have in politics right now, especially on the left and the center left, is every voter thinks that they are some sort of pundit or pollster or, player in the game. So, for example, if you look at the presidential primaries right now, you ask people, who do you think should be the candidate? Joe Biden. Is it because you love Joe Biden? Nope. It's because I think Joe Biden is the person who's going to beat Donald Trump. Well, you don't know that. You're just going with the crowd and you're going with conventional wisdom, which is very much wrong in this case, I would argue. Similarly, on impeachment, do you want to impeach Trump? Of course. If he's not worthy of impeachment, who is? But why aren't you backing it? Oh, well, I think it will hurt Democrats come next year because the Senate will never vote for it. So there's all this conventional wisdom doing the rounds, which a lot of Democratic voters have wrongly imbibed, in my view. I think they're wrong about Biden. I think he's the candidate who is most likely to deliver a Trump second term. And I think they're wrong about impeachment. We forget so quickly that Bill Clinton was impeached. He was not removed from office. And yet the Republicans won the White House in 2000, less than 2 years later.
Right. And I want to interrogate just a little bit more, because I think what it is, and look, I saw this after 8 years of Reagan Bush. the sort of the fear and exhaustion that Democrats had. And they were, the huge sigh of relief when Clinton got in. I saw this after George W. Bush, at least in 2004, where there was this sort of like notion we got to go with some type of safe choice. There is a fear. I mean, and, I think it's a legitimate fear that Donald Trump will win re-election, that the Democratic leadership fails, it seems to me, to project any type of strength or confidence in any situation, and that sends a cue to the voters as well.
Exactly. I think you're right about the cues. And, as I wrote in my Intercept column yesterday, I quoted the famous Israeli foreign minister on, his put down of the Palestinians at the UN, that the Democrats never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. This is a huge opportunity now, the chance to impeach a president with a legitimate cause, not the kind of spurious impeachment that the Republicans did against Bill Clinton, but a very legitimate impeachment, which even, some Republicans, a tiny handful of Republicans, like Justin Amash, who is a Republican, even though he's left the party, have said there's a very clear case for impeaching him over Mueller. 1,000 former federal prosecutors, including many who served under Bush and Reagan, have come out and said, yes, impeach him over obstruction of justice. And I think you'll see more, starting to peel away. Not many, but you'll see some. And that's a problem when the Democrats themselves don't want to show that leadership. I think there was somebody made a gag earlier this week. William Weld, former Republican governor of Massachusetts, who's running against Trump in the primaries, if the Republicans even allow primaries. Right. He's trying to challenge Trump. He said Trump should be executed for treason, which is, I think, ridiculously over the top. But isn't it ironic that a Republican guy is calling for the execution of Trump, while Nancy Pelosi, up until Tuesday, 4 o'clock, didn't even want to impeach the guy?
And now, so now she doesn't want to impeach him, but then she makes the decision, all right, we have to go through it. What is the rationale that if we do this really quickly, I don't understand what the theory is here. Like, I can understand, I don't agree with it, but I can understand why she was afraid of it. But it's what's the argument? Well, we impeached him, but we did it really quick. I don't get it.
I'll be honest, I don't understand the theory either, because I was having a conversation with a colleague who was reading my piece, and who said, well, what do you want? What's wrong with just getting him? It's a slam dunk. Do Ukraine, be done with it. You win the vote. The public are on board. And I said, well, you have to take a step back and ask, what is the point of impeachment? Exactly. For me, there's only two purposes to impeachment. Number one, to morally draw a line in the sand and say, this is wrong for the sake of history. With one eye on history, you say that we did not sit silently while this neo-fascist abused children at the border and obstructed justice on a daily basis and enriched himself at the U.S. taxpayers' expense and involved himself in campaign finance crimes in front of our eyes. All of the many impeachable offenses that he's done. We didn't sit quietly. We drew a line in the sand. We impeached him in the House of Representatives. That's one argument. The other argument is the political argument, which is actually it will hurt Trump. The idea that it won't hurt Trump, the idea that Trump wants to go into the next election, having been one of only 3 men in human history to be impeached by the House of Representatives, is absurd. There's no scenario in which the most thin-skinned, narcissistic, egomaniacal, megalomaniacal individual in the United States of America right now, who's obsessed with comparing himself to Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan and others, is going to be okay about being impeached, or that won't harm him. And the idea that Nancy Pelosi says we get this done in a rush, that doesn't deal with the moral question of why you're leaving out all these other crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors he's committed. And it doesn't deal with the political question, which is if you get this done by November, then what? What, you've got a party to go to? You've got hair to wash? What is the rush? You're going to get back to legislating? Nancy Pelosi knows better than you and I do, Sam, that her bills are stuck in the Senate. The same Senate that's going to vote down impeachment is also not passing any of her bills.
Yeah, I would add actually a 2-A to the political calculation you're making, because once you force a vote on impeachment, it's basically everybody is declared. I'm either protecting Donald Trump or I'm out to hold him to account. And that is something that the Democrats have always had trouble doing, is nationalizing congressional races and senatorial races. And this seems to me to be a perfect way to nationalize all these races. You go in, it's quite simple. This guy voted to protect Donald Trump, and you choose voter.
It's simple for you and I, Sam, and it's simple for a lot of voters. It's not simple for a lot of the Democratic political elites. That's the reality. The reality is that you have senators like Dianne Feinstein saying, well, do I want to lose Susan Collins from the Senate? She's literally said that openly on the record. An absurd statement to make for Senator Susan Collins, who, thanks to her, Brett Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court. You have Joe Biden. Recent reporting has revealed that Joe Biden said to Mitch McConnell, we hope to see you back, Mitch. We want to see you get, he said that, Biden. So when you have leading members of the Democratic Party saying, you know what, we're kind of okay with our Republican colleagues. We dine together. We go to the gym together. We're pals. When you have Kamala Harris even standing on the debate stage the other day referring to, quote, the late, great John McCain, which I think is an absurd statement to make about a former Republican presidential candidate who for his entire life until that healthcare vote voted against Democratic Party interests again and again and again. When you have that kind of mindset at the top of the party, yeah, it sounds easy in theory for you and I to say it's obvious this is the political move to make. But Democrats don't like wielding power. And they don't like, as you say, nationalizing races and really kind of putting their opponents under pressure. That's why we're not seeing an across-the-board impeachment. That's why up until Tuesday, 4 p.m., Nancy Pelosi, the most she had ever done, to take on Trump and censure him for his ridiculous conduct was, some strongly worded tweets and some threats from a podium, but not actually any kind of censure on the floor of a body that she controls.
Have you run into anybody yourself or anybody who's done any reporting that has at least articulated a strategy of impeaching quickly? Like, it just seems to me that, like, once you've impeached, you're going to pay the price. You might as well, if you think that's the idea, like you're going to pay a price, you might as well get something out of it. I mean, do they think that it will, like, if they impeach and it's not like it doesn't go to April or something, that somehow it's going to demotivate Republican voters? I don't quite get it. I think we just lost them. Mehdi, you there? Well, bear with us, folks. No, we'll just. Hi, Mehdi. We're on the air. Are you there? Hello, Mehdi. All right, folks. Give us a second. We'll be right back. All right, we lost you for a moment. I was asking if you had heard anybody firsthand, or if you'd heard anybody who reported, who's been reporting on this, as to like the what is the theory though, that like if we get impeachment over quickly, the pain that we will feel from impeachment will go away, even if we vote to impeach him? Like, I don't understand what even the theory is.
I don't think they've thought that far ahead. I think they've just thought about internal party unity. What my understanding is that there are these kind of frontline Democrats. There are these Democrats in swing seats who won Republican seats in 2018 who have always been nervous about impeachment. And this is the only issue that will get them on board, because it's a national security issue. It's an international issue. The Democrats love to get behind national security consensus. And this is seen as Trump, undermining American national security and foreign policy. And therefore, this is the issue that they'll come on board for. They won't come on board for, naked corruption or campaign finance violations or blatant obstruction of justice, 10 cases laid out in the Mueller report. But for this, they will. And it's for the sake of party unity that Nancy Pelosi will get behind and do this vote. It's clean. It's easy. It's a unique issue. They think it's easily understandable, by the way. Steny Hoyer said on the record, this is easy to understand. Debbie Dingell from Michigan, Pelosi ally in the leadership, has said, this is easy to understand, which I find, A, kind of patronizing, The idea that, voters only understand this and they don't understand, hush money paid to Stormy Daniels. They don't understand Trump enriching himself at the taxpayer's expense. I think that's far easier to understand. And also this idea that, the story itself is that easy to understand. I would argue, yes, in the big picture, yes. But once the Republicans start, throwing crap against the wall in terms of Hunter Biden, it's going to muddy the water. People at home who don't follow this stuff closely, I worry that they will hear, Democrats saying this about Trump and the president. They'll hear Republicans talking about Hunter Biden and the prosecutor, and they might both sides it, which is a slight worry. I mean, it's a small worry. I don't think it's that big a worry, but it's weird to say we can't impeach him on other issues because they're more complicated. How is it complicated to say that Trump obstructed justice? How is it complicated to say that the vice president of the United States has spent $600,000 of taxpayers' money on limos driving from Trump's golf course in Ireland, where he decided to stay, instead of the capital of the country?
Well, and we also now have reports that Richard Neal, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, has been sitting on another whistleblower report from, we don't know exactly whom, but someone probably in the IRS, that Donald Trump has been interfering with the IRS audit of his taxes, or something to that effect. I mean, we don't know exactly. Neal is also the guy, I'll remind people, that refused essentially to get Donald Trump's taxes from New York State, who had voted a law to basically provide it for him. And why wouldn't you say, like, wait a second, before we exhaust impeachment, because we can't impeach him twice, that's never going to happen, shouldn't we also, like, hear from this whistleblower? And I am just... I mean, for the life of me, I don't even understand what these frontline Democrats, why they think they can impeach in November and people are going to forget 8 months later or something. And I understand the idea for party unity and that maybe the entire party, 230 people, have to move somewhere because of the 7 that they're talking about. But if Donald Trump realizes that, like, hey, I got impeached and nothing happened, what does he do then?
He also has like a year. If you get done and dusted with this in November, just from a pure political point of view, you give him a year to rewrite the narrative and talk his nonsense, as he has done post-Mueller. The idea that you wouldn't keep him on the defensive, you wouldn't be demanding documents, you wouldn't be subpoenaing witnesses, you wouldn't be holding televised hearings, it's absurd. I mean, the damage that was done to Nixon was over the course of a year in the early 70s, between the Senate Watergate Committee setting up and between the House Judiciary Committee drafting articles of impeachment. By the way, just on a historical point, a lot of people aren't aware of this. There were 3 articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, which were passed. There were 2 others that didn't pass. One of them was related to the bombing of Cambodia. So yes, the House Democrats at the time did decide to bring in other things other than Watergate into that impeachment hearings. And their articles of impeachment themselves were pretty detailed and lengthy. In terms of Andrew Johnson, the first president to ever be impeached, 11 articles of impeachment were brought against him by the House of Representatives. The idea that you have to keep this clean and narrow is ahistorical. We haven't done this very often. The United States has not done impeachment very often, and when they have, it hasn't been in this way. So there's not exactly precedent for what Pelosi and co are doing. And I just think it's madness to the Congress has these powers. Why are you unilaterally disarming? And remember, Nancy Pelosi, Sam, was the one telling us until very recently he wants to be impeached, which I think is the most ridiculous conspiracy theory of our time. He's goading us into impeaching him, she said at a public event a few months ago. The idea that Donald Trump wants to be impeached was absurd then. It's definitely absurd now when you look at his Twitter feed and see how he's losing it.
Well, you can also see that they have basically sent out an army of about 30 lawyers to challenge everything in the courts and tie it all up. She also said at one point on national television that if we impeach him, then he can't be indicted when he leaves office, which is categorically, not only categorically untrue, I think like literally in the impeachment, I can't remember what article it is in the Constitution, but it says literally that you can be.
And Robert Mueller said that. Don't forget, by the way, Robert Mueller, let's go back to this Ukraine call. Robert Mueller said on the 24th of July in Congress that he could be indicted after he's left office.
Yep.
That night, that evening, the Democrats took no steps to turn Mueller's testimony into any kind of censure or impeachment articles. The very next day, the 25th of July, Donald Trump, who thinks, hey, nothing can happen to me, even after Mueller testifies, makes the call to the Ukrainians.
Right. And, you know, I also find it hard to believe that if he's willing to do this with Ukraine, why would anyone assume like this is his one little weakness? He likes to leverage the government to benefit himself, but only with Ukraine. With everybody else, he's absolutely by the book. That's the one thing about.
Well, as we now know about this, the latest stuff is the power of just calling for impeachment. We've seen documents handed over. We've seen evidence now, not just of the abuse of power, but the cover-up, this idea that they'd taken this transcript and put it in a place where you're not supposed to put it with highly sensitive intelligence material, which a lot of legal experts are saying is evidence of a cover-up, of a concealment, of breaking the law. So, yeah, if he's done it for this one cause, you're telling me there's not dozens of other transcripts of dozens of other calls knocking about? How are you going to get them if you rush through impeachment by November? These things take time. Go get the documents, do the digging. The Republicans had no story in Benghazi, and yet they went on for years, holding hearings, costing the taxpayers millions of dollars, investigating again and again. After 8 investigations, they still set up the House Benghazi Committee to go after Hillary Clinton. And they never found any dirt on her, but they did some serious damage to her reputation ahead of a presidential campaign.
Well, I think
in this case, you could actually damage Trump's reputation and find actual dirt.
It was the 6th, I think, investigation of Benghazi where they came up with the email server, frankly.
Indeed.
And so,
Indeed.
All right. Well, let me ask you just, I know we don't have too much time left here, but let me just ask you a couple of specifics here. Bill Barr, this complaint went to the Department of Justice, the OLC, and they decided no, there's nothing, there's no there, and dismissed it out of hand. It seems to me that Bill Barr, in addition to everybody who basically conspired to take this call and immediately bury it in the most sensitive, essentially safe that the U.S. government has, are involved in a cover-up. I mean, to what extent do you think that the Democrats should be bringing in Bill Barr, or at least, this is a problem.
Yeah. And this is the Bill Barr who, when he was appointed, a lot of sensible people did point out that he was going to be Donald Trump's Roy Cohn, this personal corrupt lawyer that Donald Trump had employed in the 80s. He's always wanted his own Roy Cohn, and he didn't think Jeff Sessions was that person. He finally got that person in Bill Barr. And yeah, we've seen it in the Mueller report in terms of the way he kind of spun that and misled people around the Mueller report. We've seen that in terms of, by the way, his testimony in Congress where he dodged the question about whether he'd opened investigations into anyone on Trump's request. We now know from the phone call summary, it's not a transcript, that he was asked to do so by the president. The New York Times, Michelle Goldberg did an op-ed today, which is headlined, "Just How Corrupt is Bill Barr?" And the answer is very, very, very corrupt. And the Democrats need to be shouting this from the rooftops, that the DOJ is no longer independent if it ever was, and the Attorney General is corrupt, and he should be impeached as well. At the very minimum, he should be demanded to recuse himself from this. The idea that the whistleblower goes to the Inspector General of the intelligence community and says, "Hey, I've got a complaint about Donald Trump having improper conversations with the foreign governments, which involve the Attorney General," and then the DOJ, led by the Attorney General, says, "Yeah, we're not allowing you to send this complaint to Congress." I mean, how is that not a massive conflict? How can anyone, even the most loyal right-wing Republican, with a straight face, justify that?
And people should understand, I mean, the moment that Bill Barr came out and basically did his version of Ilhan Omar and the squad should go back to where they came from, and he followed that up in a much more sort of, I guess, dignified manner in which he articulated it. People need to understand that leaving Bill Barr unscathed is highly problematic, because if you're one of those people who think that Donald Trump may not be so easily quick to leave office, even if he loses, it's all going to be a function of whether Bill Barr ties it up. And if Bill Barr is left, his reputation is continued to be unsullied, and there's no attempt to sort of dig into what this guy's been doing as a Roy Cohn for Trump. I think it's going to be highly problematic. All right, let me ask you another question.
But just very quickly on Barr, people aren't aware of this. This is not his first rodeo.
Right.
He served under George H.W. Bush and helped him cover up Iran-Contra and hand out a bunch of pardons to people who were going to basically implicate George H.W. Bush in the Iran-Contra affair. So he's done this before. He's been covering up stuff in Washington, D.C. for decades.
What is going on with Volcker? What do you know about Kurt Volcker? I mean, Kurt Volcker is the guy that Well, was the ambassador to Ukraine. He is the guy who Giuliani seems to be trying to argue somehow it's exculpatory for him that he was invited to go by the State Department to deal with Ukraine. It sort of begs the question, is like, why is the State Department doing this? But Volcker apparently is unpaid. Were you aware that he is like a liaison there who is apparently unpaid, he's just a guy who apparently is doing the U.S. State Department a favor.
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me, Sam, because all of these figures in all of these circles, I mean, what are they doing there? Volcker, Giuliani. I mean, the Rudy Giuliani story might go down as one of the most amazing stories of this presidency in terms of his big mouth and erratic behavior and brazen lying regularly on live TV. Is that what's going to screw over Trump in the long run? Every time he opens his mouth, it seems like he does some kind of damage. But I know there's a theory circulating in some circles that they want him out there distracting and taking hits, but I'm not sure I buy that because he's so unpredictable and so unhinged. This guy was once mayor of New York and seen as a serious Republican presidential candidate. And I think all of these people in Trump's orbit, all of these people floating around Ukraine, they all need to be investigated. They all need to be put on the record. I think Chris Hayes tweeted that last night. Get all these people, subpoena them, put them under oath, ask them these questions. That takes time. I hope they have the time to do that. As you said just now, the 6th Benghazi hearing found the email server. Who knows what you're going to find when you start? Most of us didn't know who Kurt Volker even existed until 24, 36 hours ago. So how many other people are out there who we don't know exist? But we know that, Trump employs all sorts of people. Trump's fixers employ all sorts of people. Now we know the State Department, Mike Pompeo, is involved in all this. I can't even follow, to be honest. I'll tell you listeners clearly, I can't even follow all the links here. It's so ridiculous. I mean, I saw Giuliani posting a text from the State Department today, in part of his ongoing row with the State Department about what his role was. This all has to be investigated and it has to be taken seriously. But my worry is that, there's a rush. We even miss things on Ukraine. Best case scenario, you get impeachment on Ukraine and you say, okay, we impeach the president. Worst case scenario, you F up the entire Ukraine thing because the Democrats tend to F things up. I would like to see something more than both that best case and worst case scenario. As I say, I go back to the beginning of our conversation. I would like to see Trump held to account and impeached for torturing children at the border, for being involved with Michael Cohen in paying illegal hush money to Stormy Daniels on the eve of the election, which helped him get elected, for obstructing justice on 10 different occasions, as the Mueller report pointed out, for illegally trying to divert aid from Puerto Rico, where 3,000 Americans died, and diverting it to Texas and Louisiana. That's impeachable. For threatening to use the U.S. government to go after Amazon and the Washington Post. That's impeachable. I would like to see those things held up. There's no reason the Democrats can't do all of this. I don't buy that they can't do all of this. Of course they can.
I agree with you. Mehdi Hasan, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam.